Welcome into a podcast about basketball, the NBA, basketball by association to be specific. My name is Arky. Shea. That is Joel C. Cordes. Joel, as we predicted, your Denver Nuggets, the best team of all time. We're putting that one to bed early. Joel, how are you?
I'm good. We've been calling for a Nuggets finals, or at least a Western Conference finals, for quite a few years here now. I know they did reach it the one time, but finally they're there. We got to get the Sixers in at some point, Arky, because you were betting hard on them all along, and that hasn't happened. But at least the Nuggets are there. The Nuggets are finally there. Congrats, Denver, and go get a ring. Please stop Jimmy Butler. Someone please stop him.
Did you see, before you go on, I guess, to name the episode or something, did you see that Jimmy Butler and Shakira followed each other on Instagram after their game 4? She was in attendance, and I mean, it's weird to do the follow back after a loss, but whatever, it counts. We may have a little love in the air. We have some Butler kids maybe in the future that have their hips not telling any lies.
Yeah, let's not go that far, but yeah, we can also blame the loss on Jimmy Butler clearly being distracted by Game 5 or Game 4, I should say. That must have been it. So,
I mean, or
Celtics
really
fans rejoice. You're coming back. You're coming back because Shakira's involved now.
Yes. Whenever, wherever. Joel C. Cordes, glad to have you aboard. Do you want to get into the topic, or do we name the show? We got to name the show, right?
Let's name the show. And there's only one player in NBA history who's logged 147 career playoff games. This is a weird one. This is a really random one. But he is from our era. You would have seen him play when he actually did play. This is episode 147. That's why we're locked in on this. But this is a guy who, a two-time NBA champ. He was on the 93-94 All-Rookie team. And like last week's show moniker, spent most of his career with the Detroit Pistons. He did win a ring with them. He won a ring with the 01 Lakers. But this is a guy who 147 career playoff games, never averaged more than 12 and a half points. Actually, no, excuse me. Did average 14 points a game during one season. That was 96-97. But a career average of 8.5 points per game, under 3 assists. Did average a steal for his career, and that's why he's in. I'm not sure if you're going to get this one, and I'm not sure how else to give clues for this, although he is a Jackson State University graduate, as well as Alcorn State. Got to be one of the only guys from either of those colleges in the NBA. And
who went to Jackson State and Alcorn? Like, it got to the NBA.
Yeah.
Who?
Should I just give you this one?
I'm not sure. Yeah, you can. The only Alcorn State guy I think I know is it's Air McNair. So I don't know who.
It's not.
It's not Steve McNair.
Nope.
The NFL football quarterback.
It's not Air McNair. So much so would this one be difficult that I don't even have nicknames to give you. He doesn't even have nicknames listed on Basketball Reference. I mean, he played a lot in the NBA. Logged 438 starts and nearly 1,000 career games. It's not a short career by any means. The dude was in the league for 16 years, but most of you out there are probably not going to guess, but this is the Lindsey Hunter episode, a guy who just was on a lot of Detroit Pistons rosters for a long time, did a season in Milwaukee, did a season in LA where he won a championship in 01-02, did a season with the Raptors, and then went back to the Pistons and won with Bad Boys too. He was on that roster and finished out his career in 2009 and 2010 with the Chicago Bulls, his second season there in Chicago. So Lindsey Hunter, a lot of people may not know or remember, but we're going to do you proud here on this episode.
We're going to have to do an episode at some point, maybe this summer, on the all-time list of guys who just glommed on and was able to grab themselves a ring. Didn't do much of anything. Not saying Lindsey Hunter makes that list because he was a productive piece for a while.
He was a rotation guy until that 01-02 season, and he had 47 starts next to Kobe Bryant there. Played all 82 games, but after that, never appeared in more than 76 games. That was one time in 04-05. But yeah, most of those seasons were 50 games or less. 30 games is more about the average. So just a good locker room, good rotation guy, third string point guard on the back half of his career.
Don't think he also thought he'd get a sweet, sweet episode of a podcast named after him, but here we go. The Lindsey Hunter edition is now underway. Joe, let's get straight to it. We are awaiting Game 5 as we speak of the Eastern Conference Finals, the only championship yet to be determined on either side of the brackets. The Heat meltdown, Joel, in the third quarter of Game 4 at home, had a chance to just knock the Celtics to the floor. But now, Joel, Boston's got hope. Boston's got a little bit of hope, and Jason Tatum goes for 33 in that game, and all of a sudden, they've only got 3 more straight games to win in this series, and it's competitive again. Joel, so let me ask you this. Without being too hyperbolic with this, as I sort of led into, does this Celtics team, as constructed mentally and physically, do they have what it takes to battle all the way back and to win 4 straight?
This one doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. There's a couple of vultures circling the Heat right now that I'm not sure a lot of people have paid attention to, and the Heat notoriously close to the vest with their injury reporting. They're very much like the Spurs. Their PR department is Kremlin level. Gabe Vincent is not healthy. Gabe Vincent had a couple of injuries in that Game 4. Kyle Lowry has been nursing injuries all season, and we've seen him go down in pain a couple of times where he's taken hard falls. That's their entire, that's their point guard rotation right there. There's nobody's behind either of those two guys. And this team is down to the dregs as far as like who's been rushed into the rotation. There are no guards left. There's literally no guards left if they lose one or both of those guys. I'm not saying that can happen. They would likely run Jimmy Butler at point guard if necessary. Maybe even Bam Adebayo would have to play some point center because he's the next logical guy out of that group, and they have done that before with Bam. I think Boston's going to need something like that in order to win 4 straight. But to get another one here and to really make Miami sweat, I think is entirely possible, especially going back home. The biggest adjustment I saw from Boston in Game 4 is something that I don't think Milwaukee did, and I don't think New York did either. Boston stopped trying to pass away from contact to an open man, which the Golden State Warriors, the Phoenix Suns, lots of teams along the way have taught us that that's the right way to play basketball. When the wall is coming, you pass out and you find the open guy. Boston, especially their top tier guys, were running into contact in the first 3 games and passing out of it to an open shooter. The only problem is those open shooters, A, weren't hitting shots, and B, typically weren't that open because Miami was playing this flex man zone type of thing, and they were recovering like crazy. They were doing an amazing job of jumping passing lanes, closing out to shooters, playing at an intensely high defensive level. And Boston instead did to Miami what Jimmy Butler has been doing to the Celtics, what he did to the Knicks, what he very much did to the Bucks. Just run through people and make the referee in a conference playoff final swallow their whistle and let you play through the contact, or decide that they're going to call the ticky-tack stuff. But then that's probably going to happen to Jimmy Butler too. And yet to these playoffs, it has not. So I saw a much more physical Boston team. And what do you know? When they started to run through defenders, it collapsed the defense even more. They started to get some kickouts. They started to hit some shots. Guys started to get a little more confident. Boston, for the first time in the series, did not seem to be playing on their heels. They were aggressive, and even when they got down, they were still running into people. They were still flying all over the place. Game 3 was atrocious when they got blown out. You could just sense by watching it through the TV screen that they were on their heels and they were tentative. That was not the Boston Celtics I saw in game 4.
Yeah, and that's sort of what makes, I guess, when you're doing things like what we do, which is a little more advantageous for us because we have, a week in between as opposed to, say, having to fill 4 hours the next day after a game.
Yeah.
When you try to toss an entire narrative on a series after a game, it changes so quickly. And, when I'll be honest, when Miami was up, what was it, 5 or 6 at half, I thought, if Boston doesn't come out strong, they don't come out physical and like ready to do that. And they showed some physicality in the first half.
Yeah.
Like if they don't continue chopping at that tree, man, there's a lot of dudes that if they get down by 10, 12 early in the third quarter, I think they go into a shell and they're done.
In
But
game 4 of a sweep situation, absolutely, especially after you got
Yeah.
your butt kicked like they did in 3.
Yeah, but they didn't. They didn't. They had a tremendous third quarter. They hit a bunch of shots, which obviously helps with that confidence that you were talking about. But that scored about like 15 in the third quarter. And then they ended up just sort of salting it away. They think I outscored them by another 7 or 8 in the fourth quarter. So that's sort of the difference of what continuity in your shot making can do. And just when the shots drop, like you feel so much better about yourself. I think Boston felt really good about themselves after game 2 or throughout game 2, I should say. Game 3, they got punched in the mouth really hard and that thing got away from them.
They
fast.
folded. They folded.
They folded like a cheap suit, man. And then game 4, to their credit, mentally, I thought this was a team ready to give up if they felt enough adversity early on in the second half. And they didn't. They came back in the third quarter and they did what good teams do. What a good, well spaced out, talent wise team, and a team that doesn't easily fold because they sort of saw that success early, and it had happened early in the third quarter for them to be able to do it. And they did. So now I think they feel a little bit better about themselves coming back to Boston, seeing themselves for game 5. I love to say home court, but like they're like 500 at home court in the last month and a half, 2 months a game. So it's not like they're winning a bunch of games at home as it is. But you got to feel better about being at home than you do have to go back to Miami. So I think I give them a puncher's shot in game 5, and then let's see where the chips fall in Miami.
There's also some statistical things that are, again, an undercurrent here that could be damaging for the Heat. You look at Al Horford and Marcus Smart, 12 points for Horford, 11 for Smart in game 4. And you go, big deal. But that actually is a big deal with how lousy those guys were playing through the first 3 games, unable to hit anything.
It's true.
Horford
it doesn't seem like a lot of success, but the way the first few games have been going, that's a lot of success.
And they shot confidently, and they were good looks that actually went down. And Horford was plus 23 on the night. Smart was plus 15. Okay. It's been a long time since you got that out of both of those guys. Grant Williams, who has been giving them a good boost of energy off the bench, actually shot the ball well too. And the one guy they're still waiting on, who I think is due, and this is bad for Miami, Malcolm Brogdon has been absolutely atrocious shooting the ball in this series. But this is a guy who has been in that elite shooters club, and I forget what it is, the 40, 50, 90 club or whatever it is. He's been in that club a couple of times or on the doorstep. Malcolm Brogdon is a shooter at volume too. I think he's due for a big game here at some point, as long as Boston keeps going back to him, and they'd be stupid not to. This is a guy, a 6th man of the year candidate the entire season. The other thing for Miami, throughout this playoffs, and even in this series, it was almost video game-esque, the number of crazy tough shots that the Heat have been hitting. And it's not just been Jimmy Butler, right? I mean, he's hit some crazy threes. He's got the Kobe fadeaway jumper going on right now. But Gabe Vincent, Kevin Love, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, they were all on fire through much of these playoffs. Bam Adebayo plays closer to the basket, but shooting a high percentage. Adebayo was minus 21 in game 4. But here's the Heat from downtown, 8 of 32. They were 25%. From the floor, 43.5%. That right there is a lot closer to the numbers that they shot all season. There is the possibility that they've been riding a hot hand, and the hot hand is starting to cool way, way down, and we're starting to regress back towards the means of the sample size that we had for 82 games during the regular season. And you can say playoff Jimmy, and you can say playoff this, and you cannot discount the fact that Miami has played so hard, so tough, but they've also hit a whole bunch of crazy shots. And if all of a sudden that starts to go, and Boston is the one who now is due to progress to the means and shoot closer to what they did all season, rather than this horrible series that they've had, things can get interesting real fast, because you are talking about in Miami, with all that guile, all that veterancy, all that toughness, you are still talking about one of the absolute worst offensive teams in the league all season long. That is dinged up already. That could be dinged up more than they're letting on. They've been out-rebounded in this series like crazy. Although they did, oddly enough, in this loss, out-rebound the Celtics 44-39. I don't know. I think Boston at least gets this next game, and then we'll see about, Miami really tightening their belt and just uglifying a game 6 that would be at home and trying to close out Boston there.
You brought up the fact that the Heat were 25% from 3 in Game 4. 25% was Malcolm Brogdon shooting from the field the last 3 games in this series. And I think 25% is probably the percentage chance I would give to Boston coming out and blowing Miami out in Game 5. I think there is a legitimate shot that coming off the heels of this, that Boston's able to come out and just smoke from the very, very beginning, get a little bit of momentum, and then, as you mentioned, Miami has to make that adjustment, because some of that is sort of figuring out what are a couple of these banged up injuries gonna mean for Miami. Like, what does Gabe Vincent sort of mean by Game 5? And
because he's been so huge for them as a shot maker, right? I mean, Gabe Vincent has been Derek Fisher level as far as like an undersized point guard that you keep forgetting about. And every time you forget about him, he's knocking down a huge, huge 3 with no conscience about it. Like Fisher and Vincent are really reminding me of each other through this playoff series, and really throughout this entire playoffs for Miami.
And Game 6 would be in Miami on Saturday. So fortunately, the NBA has decided we're not going to give you 5 days in between games all the time, as they used to do. But I don't know.
I got a quick question for you. Okay. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but it's been rattling around in my brain a bit. Boston, we thought, would be a good matchup for Miami. Do you think, had the Sixers been able to close out Boston, because Philly was so close, if the Sixers are in this series, is this a different story? Are we looking at a 3-1 hole? Would the Sixers have gotten swept by Miami as hot as they were? Do the Sixers split this? Because I feel like, in hindsight here, I'm not sure that Joel Embiid could have been stopped so much so that the entire Philly offense broke down.
Easy answer for me is to say that Philly has no better shot than probably 6 games to win the series.
Okay.
The coaching matchup then at that point is just so phenomenally tilted in one favor. And it's not Doc Rivers, despite how many times he's been in the playoffs and how many years he's been coaching. But I do agree, sort of an actual physicality, the lineup itself probably makes it harder for Miami to do what they're doing. I think Philadelphia is a little hardier. I think they're a lot hardier than Boston. Boston's a soft team, man. And you and I have talked about this all year. I've said it, I don't know, 100 times on this podcast. This team is not built for big physical Miami.
They're a good defensive team, but not a tough team, I think, is what you're saying.
Miami's the worst case scenario they could have gotten, as far as sort of getting up in the grill and sort of letting moments get inside the brain. Having Jimmy Butler respond to Al Horford's timeout call, and Grant Williams sort of doing some chirping, sort of poking the bear, as everyone wanted to talk about.
I'll say, just to interrupt real quick, because Jimmy Butler, he ain't going to punk on PJ Tucker the way he kept trying to punk on Grant Williams.
Grant
It
Williams.
ain't going to happen. PJ Tucker is going to put Jimmy Butler on the floor if they do that. And former teammates Jimmy Butler probably knows better than to shake that one.
Grant Williams, I don't know how many people know this about him. He's a super nerd. Like he likes to dress up as Batman for Halloween. He's a World of Warcraft kind of fan. Like he loves like the card game, not the online video game or whatever. Or maybe it's Magic the Gathering, one of the two. Like he loves stuff like that. And when you sort of listen to him, like he's not built to go one-on-one verbally and mentally with Jimmy Butler. Okay. Not a lot of people
but he's given it a shot, and I respect him for that. I respect him for that.
I guess.
And he had that enormous two-handed block on Jimmy. He had that enormous two-handed block on Jimmy on the fadeaway where Jimmy went right back to the Kobe shot, and Williams finally figured it out. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like if
he's the third Lopez brother, basically.
Okay, that's fair. I think Philadelphia is a better physical matchup based on their roster and the way they play, not just the top to bottom talent, the way they like. Tyrese Maxey could have had a great series against Miami. I think Joel Embiid would have been really tough if we got the Joel Embiid we saw during the regular season, which we didn't get in the playoffs.
Yeah,
we didn't get a ton of that in the playoffs. He was down like 9 or 10 points per game in average in the playoffs than he was in the regular season. So we didn't quite get the same Joel Embiid. So maybe not, but at least on paper, it looks like it's a better matchup than what Boston is physicality wise.
I can see Maxey, unlike many of the Celtics until now, and especially because he's built kind of in that running back style as a guy, who would have just been running through people and daring for a call.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I could see James Harden in an ultra tough, physical, mental type of series curling up into the fetal position and sucking his thumb, which we've seen happen before too. Like,
yeah, but one of the games he's going to go for 43. Like one of the rest he may score 43 total, but like he's going to go 1 for 4. He's going to score 1 and 43, or one game of 43 points, and the rest we'll see how that goes. So
yeah, it was an interesting what if as I was looking at this series. We don't have to spend any more time on it because it didn't happen, but it was interesting.
I agree with you. I think honestly, the Knicks have been the best matchup so far in the playoffs for the Heat. And it's, if you notice, there's similar styles offensively and defensively. Not the same, but Tom Thibodeau doesn't have sort of the roster that just runs. They're a tough physical team. They're hard-nosed for the most part from top to bottom as far as the dudes.
Big and strong. It's a big and strong roster.
Big tough team, man, and that's why I think you've seen that Miami, while on this run, that's the reason it's taken them 6 to get rid of New York and what could be 5 to get rid of everybody else. So. Let's go over to the Western Conference, if you don't mind, for a moment, because the Denver Nuggets are your Western Conference champions. They are going to the NBA Finals, and as we got to watch on television, 4 seconds of their celebration, because the rest was concentrated on Anthony Davis walking to the locker room and LeBron James walking to the locker room. Cool thing that they were able to do it in Los Angeles. I told you last week, I thought Denver would win Game 2 in Denver, and then LA would have to do some work in Los Angeles. They got close. They got close to being able to get one of those games, and 2 of those games, honestly. But if you watch, was it game 3 where they just slowly melted away that lead? The Denver just came back and just
they kind of did it in Game 4 as well. They were down, I think. What was it like? 15 points. They were down by 15 at halftime in Game 4. But
there was a point where they were down like 8, like 6 minutes into the fourth quarter, and then LA couldn't hit anything. So I think it was Game 3. I think that's Game 3 I'm thinking of. But Los Angeles unable to do so. And hey, here's a cool thing: Tristan Thompson's still in the league for like a okay. So
and Tristan Thompson, God bless his soul for latching on here with the LeBron connection, but Tristan Thompson played 10 minutes in that game. He was a 0, not plus or minus. Good on him. Good on him.
Yeah.
But where was Jared Vanderbilt? Like, I know Vanderbilt struggled a little bit, and this has maybe not been a great matchup for him, but Vando has been their energy guy and really their lead defender at this point ever since the second half of the season trade. And no Jared Vanderbilt in Game 4. That to me is kind of an inexcusable mistake by Darvin Ham. He hasn't made many, so I mean he gets a few along the way, but I did not understand that one. And if you're so cold shooting, you're so cold, Why is Malik Beasley not playing ever in this series against his former team? Against his former team.
I felt like I yelled that was to myself for like ever. It's like, hey, if this is a scenario, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm not saying he has to be in the game, but if
give him a look.
If the other guy is frozen,
if all the other guys are frozen,
enough, right? Then you've got to do something different, right? Like you can't just expect, hey, they'll work through it. You got no more leeway. Like there's no more room to just play around with that. So
and I know statistically, like they were 8 of 20 on the night from downtown, 40%. That doesn't sound so bad, except in the NBA to only hit 8 threes, even if it was at a 40% clip, just doesn't cut it anymore. But you're right.
20.
It was the second half that really killed them.
Yeah.
And Lonnie Walker wasn't hot. He only played 7 minutes. D'Angelo Russell had gotten benched. Your starters have less three-point shooting with Hachimura in there instead of Russell. Like, give Beasley 6-7 minutes and see if he can hit something some point in this series. And everybody who's listened to this show knows that I'm a big Malik Beasley guy, and I liked him before he got to the Timberwolves. I really liked him when he was in a Wolves uniform. Same thing for Vanderbilt. Those are two of my guys. I'm going to follow their career. I love those guys. But they bring something to the table. They bring something really meaningful that LA could have used in Game 4. That's all I'll say. I think Darvin Ham made a mistake there, but he was pretty good through the series and definitely through the second half of the season as a coach.
23s that they shot. Denver shot 33.
Yeah.
They shot 33. It's not like they shot a much greater percentage. Was it 30? No, they didn't shoot it.
Denver only played 7 guys. Yeah, they tightened their rotation too.
But they also hit 4 more threes than so they shot a lower percentage, but made 4 more threes than Los Angeles. That's sort of it's how the math works out, man. Like that's 12 more points than what you got if you just. I'm not saying just start jack them up, but man, it's such a terrible shooting night from beyond the arc, numbers wise. I should say the amount of to be able to do that, and still had a shot at the end of the game. Still had a shot at the very end of the game. And LeBron is
couple of shots, and along the way there was 2 3-pointers that LA had that were turned to 2, so they could have had 10 3-pointers made. But feet were on the line. There was a goaltending call that was missed. That's 4 points right there. And you can't really ever play that game, but in a 2-point game, your mind goes there. LA had chances, I guess, is the big thing. They had plenty of chances to win.
They were up 15 at halftime.
Yeah.
They had plenty of chances. At halftime and scored 16 in the third quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a collapse. This is an absolute collapse by the Lakers to be able to fight their way back in the series like Boston did. Boston was down at the end at the halftime at Game 4 and fought their way back and had a massive third quarter. Los Angeles was up big at halftime. Probably felt a little good about themselves. Denver came back out and said, "No, we're getting back in this now," and got back in almost immediately.
And that's just it. Like as much as this can be an LA collapse, the Nuggets time and time again in this series showed a mental toughness that I did not know they had. We had seen it along the way throughout the playoffs. It was there at times. And obviously to be first in the West, even if it's only 53 wins, that takes some mental toughness to be able to get there too. But it's something that Mike Malone, he's a big mental toughness guy. He calls them out in the media all the time for any little screw up. That button can get worn out after a while, but he does it. But Denver did not fold at all during this series. And I'm not just saying that because they got a sweep. This was a Lakers team that really manhandled them a few years ago in the bubble. Just manhandle. And I know the squads are different, but the stars were the same. And we have that concern that Denver might come in, be a little bit starstruck, maybe feel the pressure of being the number 1 seed against the 7. The fact that it's LeBron and AD again, and they had figured out Jokic a few years ago, but Jokic is so much better now than even a few years ago. And Jamal Murray too. Murray too.
Yeah, if you watch like bubble Jokic, right? Like you're like, oh, this guy's really, really good.
Yeah, he's an all-star. He's an all-star.
You watch him now, and you're like, wow. Like it feels almost night and day-ish. Like how much better he has gotten, and he's just he's just crazy, man. He's just crazy, crazy good. Like, because it doesn't look like what he does should be working,
No,
and it does. And you're just
the
like,
eye test does not compute most
no,
of the time.
it does not. And I love every piece of that for Nikola Jokic. And let me say this, because I'm not one here that wants to spend a lot of time talking about the Lakers because they got swept. Clearly the one seed played like the one seed, and yet, listen, the Lakers did a great job getting back into the play-in
Absolutely.
and getting this
Absolutely.
far. But the one seed played like the one seed, and they did what that thing that's so hard to do, which is get over the potential mental hurdle of seeing a team over and over again that just you maybe have struggled with. And they punked them. Man, this Denver team, this playoff run is historically good. Like this is an all-time run Denver's putting on as far as the number of games it's taken to put people out of their playoff misery. And they've done it against a team we thought might be not only a contender, but maybe the favorite going into the West, and in Phoenix. And obviously LA was as hot as anybody was coming in. And there was a lot of discussions whether or not LeBron was going to be able to carry that team back. And LeBron didn't play badly. Anthony Davis was, Anthony Davis does some of the things that Anthony Davis does and that we've sort of talked about before. But
good and bad. Yep.
I want to talk about Denver for a minute, if you don't mind. Nikola Jokic, we know exactly what he is, and what he's been turning into, and we can keep talking about him. I'm cool with that. But did you see the numbers Jamal Murray's put up in this series?
Yeah.
Like this series, 31, 37, 37, 25. That's your point totals for the 4 games. I'd like to give you more, but they're only allowed to play 4 games if you do the sweep. So, man, this team, this was what I thought Denver could be like 2 years ago, right? It just sort of was
before the injuries.
Before the injuries,
screwed it all
right?
up.
And to see them sort of be that dominant team for the vast majority of the season in the West, and to see them take care of business, not just squeak by in a game 7 at home kind of thing, with a last second shot against Phoenix kind of thing. To see them put their ghosts in their coffin for the final time, and like the Lakers, and to get past this. I mean, I know one of the options is Miami on the other side, but man, I really like Denver as far as coming into you cannot be in a better position, I think, than what Denver is right now.
I like Denver regardless of who they see in the finals. And I mean, the game has slowed down so much for Nikola Jokic. He's getting into that stage that LeBron has lived in for most of his career, where he just sees everything before it happens and knows exactly where everyone is and how it's going to work and to play within himself. Jamal Murray, it's a killer instinct. It's not just going out to get points. It's timely points. It's attacking. It's understanding that 2-man game with Jokic, but with everybody else on the floor. It's beautiful.
Was it game 3? I think it was game 3 where he had like a bad first half, and then like the second half.
He saved them. The fourth quarter was all Jamal Murray. He saved them.
The fourth quarter was you look at the shot chart, it's like Murray, free throw, Murray, Murray, like Jokic, Murray. You're like, guys.
And those were tough shots. It was crazy. He was well defended. He was hot, and he did not stop shooting. And that is exactly what the Nuggets need, because as great of a first ballot Hall of Famer as Jokic is, and we've said this for a while, everybody knows this, Jokic wants to distribute. Jokic will take the final shot, and he's getting better and better and better about being assertive offensively for his own shot and finding that. But he still, I think, is best served by being with a guy or a couple of guys who are just chomping at the bit for that last shot. They want it so much, and Jokic is going to get it to him, and he's going to set that screen or tilt the defense or whatever he has to do to get that guy the shot, because Jamal Murray wants it, and I love that. And, a guy like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who's already a champion and has played on a bunch of good teams already and some bad ones. He's been around the league. He does not shy away from shooting either. He's their lead defender most of the time, but he doesn't shy away from taking that shot. Michael Porter Jr. is volume shooting 101. Like, he's just going to keep
shooting well. Played another good series. Played another really good series.
You want a guy like that.
Series.
Yeah, I'm going to get
what he's going to be, right?
Yeah, like Michael Porter Jr. is just going to keep shooting over and over and over, and you cannot fall asleep on it because as soon as he gets hot, you are in big trouble. Aaron Gordon has reworked his body. He's reworked his game from being like this springy, athletic, but kind of soft power forward to being really tough inside and physical and just mixing it up and putting his head down and blowing through people to get to the rim, not just coming out of the dunker spot for pretty alley-oops and all that stuff. Like, he really is adding an element of toughness that they also then get from Bruce Brown off the bench, who has been so huge for them as a Swiss Army knife. And we've seen this for a couple of years on different teams from Bruce Brown. Man, is he valuable. And the same thing for Jeff Green. Like, Uncle Jeff just does the right thing every single time. And that's why he's out there, because he's not a variable whatsoever. He is a constant.
Yeah.
He'll take the shot if he has it. He'll move the ball if he doesn't. I mean, he had 2 points, 1 block, and 1 rebound in 10 minutes and was minus 12. And you know what? Jeff Green played a fantastic game.
Yeah.
In game 4.
This is where the plus minus is a little like, for me, bleh, right? Like, I would not look at them as an overall negative player in that game. For the time they was into it, but the way the statistics work out, that's just how it looks. But I wouldn't say that was a bad outing for him.
Last thing before we talk LeBron to end the show here on Denver, I don't want to see them run only 7 guys through the whole finals. I think that's not great, and I know that
Let me ask you that about that. Then I know what you're on that exact same topic. Do you think it's more because they concentrated to get through this team specifically? I do. And Christian Brown got to play through the first 3 games, but really wasn't effective. And as a rookie, I understand saying, nope, we're going to put guys that have been in this moment. We need this game. I do think they can still get something out of Ish Smith or Reggie Jackson, especially Reggie Jackson. I think might be able to give them some sort of a lift in the NBA Finals, even if it's just for 1 game for a stretch. I would take a look at some of those guys. Just give them a few minutes and see if you get something, because if you do, that sometimes can be the difference in an NBA Finals. And the good news for Denver, they got to be hoping that Boston does win tonight and does extend this. Yeah.
Because then you might be able to get away with 7 guys.
Because not only they'll get extra time to rest, they already got extra time because Miami plays a day later, and then now they have to play another game, Miami or Boston, whoever it ends up being. But then that winner has to go to Denver for the first 2 games. So they've got a couple of built-in advantages early on. They get to go home, and whenever Miami's going to have to be at least a little gassed, if that's the team, then you put them up. Depending on what their injuries are, and then put them up at the Mile. You put yourself in a pretty good spot at least. And if you're Boston,
as long as it's not too long and you get rusty, and your shooting fades. But again, Denver hopefully is mentally tougher than that. They've shown that so far.
Well, that's the thing. That's the one thing I think everyone on this show, meaning you and me, was just waiting for Denver, which is we know they're good enough talent-wise. The pieces seem to fit. Mike Malone's doing a good job with them. Can they just get past the hurdles that have held them back before? They didn't have to deal with injuries this year. They're healthy now. They showed it in the regular season being the number 1 seed. They have blitzed their entire Western Conference to be able to get to be their champion. And now they get to wait a little bit on whether it's Boston or Miami. And I'm sure they're big Celtics fans now. But I'm with you. I think, we'll talk about it when it's time to preview them. But I find it difficult to think that either one of those 2 rosters in the East can match up for 7 games if it gets to that with Denver on a consistent basis.
I honestly think Boston has a better shot to match up with Denver than Miami
does. I think they got a better shot, but I don't
you know what? Miami's been throwing every prediction and everything that makes sense out the window. So
listen, I want both Miami and Boston to fall into a harbor somewhere, a harbor into the Atlantic Ocean, respectively, because the Atlantic Division should only have 1 champion, and it should be the New York Knicks going through every year. All right, Joel, I got a few minutes here before we close it out. I want to talk about the National Basketball Association's greatest player of all time, as voted on by me just now. LeBron James has a 40.9. He had the shot at the end, multiple shots at the end. Couldn't do it. And then afterwards said that, he's going to take a long, hard look at his, his body, his career. And, maybe retirement is something he does. In fact, he says that it's going to be an option. Joe, we've talked about how his dream is to play with Bronny, right? Bronny's going to USC next year. So we got at least 1 year that he's going to be in college. Joe, you tell me this. Do you think legitimately LeBron James makes a consideration, a full-hearted consideration of complete retirement?
I think he looks at this Lakers team and considers it, maybe for the first time seriously in his career. And to me, that's what he was saying is, up to this point, retirement was never really on the table. I was always coming back, unfinished business. But 20 years in, he's accomplished everything there is to accomplish. I think you at least are looking at the other side of the coin and thinking about it. And that's where he is. I don't think this is an imminent retirement. As much as LeBron James has a pretty good head on his shoulders, I would be surprised if he all of a sudden just announced during an off season, hey, I'm retiring, and he didn't take the victory lap that so many, of the top players ever.
It does seem unlike him to not want to have that last year. Like, everyone knows I'm leaving, so give me your presence and your last standing ovations.
Yeah. And I have to say this, if in frustration, whether it's with the Lakers, which how frustrated can you be at the Lakers if you're LeBron, honestly, because they have reworked this roster around you, not only annually, but sometimes twice annually, like this
We thought
year.
It was impossible this year.
Yes.
Like,
they've reworked it around you so many times to make it happen. And you got all the way to the conference finals as the 7th seed when you were dead in the water 30 games into the season. So you can't be mad at them. I understand if out of frustration, it was a tough loss. You gave it everything you had. It was this huge ride. And now all of a sudden it's over because the Nuggets ripped your heart out. I get that. But if he would retire for whatever reason, this is not the last we see of LeBron James. He will be back Michael Jordan style in an unretirement. It will absolutely happen. Maybe it would be with the Lakers again. Maybe it would simply be with whatever team Bronny gets drafted to. Although LeBron did kind of intimate that maybe his son doesn't actually want that scenario to happen, because he very clearly said, that's my dream. That's not necessarily Bronny's, and I have to respect that. So that may be something where they've talked about it. That'd be a tough position if you're Bronny James to come into the NBA and all of a sudden your dad shows up on your team and you're playing on the same team, and LeBron is, I don't know how he is as a father, but he's kind of demanding as a teammate. He's earned the right to be that way over the course of his career. He also, like you said, is arguably the greatest NBA player of all time. That's going to be really difficult, and you're going to get all sorts of knuckleheads who are talking about nepotism, and it's going to be hard for Bronny to get out from under that shadow, and maybe he doesn't need that in his career if he has an NBA career, which looks like it's possible, but not a certainty. If that happens, he's got to kind of carve his own path. He's never going to be LeBron James, but nobody should be expecting that of him. And if those two are on the same team, that's going to be a circus of circuses.
Yeah, it was unfair of us to think LeBron James was going to be LeBron James, right? Like, immediately in high school when, ESPN sending television cameras to broadcast their games. You're like, why? Because he's going to be the next greatest. And, he's one of the few that's worked out like that. Those prodigies that has worked out maybe even better than what most reasonable people should have expected, except for immediately the conversations was about him and Michael Jordan. And he's been dealing with that for 20 years, which is, a little unfair to him. But it is what it shall be.
He's answered all the questions. Answered all the questions. You're either a LeBron guy because he's answered those questions, or you're a Jordan guy because it doesn't matter how LeBron answers the question. Yeah. You're always a Jordan guy, and that's fine. That is what it is. That's fine.
That's fine. There's not a definitive list in the NBA Hall of Fame that's a ranking that you go to that adjusts every year. They don't say, Steph had a good year, so maybe we move down John Stockton a couple of spots. There's not a moving list. I think LeBron does not. I think there's no shot he retires. I think there's zero shot that he retires this year. I I saw someone allude to the fact that he may take a year off and then come back, like you're mentioning, like Michael Jordan style. And I would hate that for him, just because it's even more comparisons to Michael Jordan. And I don't follow a lot of NBA folks on my timeline on Twitter, and I still every literal day get a Michael Jordan argument versus LeBron James, and I don't understand how that's even possible. Like every single day, no matter what time of the year it is, I get that conversation. But I think LeBron James comes back. I think he wants to at least see his son in the NBA for a year, maybe as an opponent. You know, I can't imagine both of them say going playing for Indiana or something else. Like Indiana's like, hey, you know what? We're drafting LeBron's son, and LeBron's like, oh yeah, well I'm good then. I don't think I want to find myself in in Indianapolis for most of the year. So good luck, Bronny, in your USC career and post career. But I think LeBron's back for at least probably one or two more runs. I mean, he just had a 40-point output, right? Like he averaged more points this year than he did in his 2013 MVP year. 4 more points per game this year than his team. So there's still a lot of meat on the bones. It's just, you know, how many more miles are left in those legs?
If the body's breaking down, he may have to start taking some pretty aggressive adjustments, whether it be resting the first 20 games or, like you said, taking a year off. But to take that much time off, you might get healed up, and the clock has been ticking that much more, and you come back and are just a shadow of yourself. I mean, we've seen that with a lot of guys on the tail end of their career, and LeBron is getting to that point. I mean, he's going to be 40, so
and he's got to win at least 3 more titles to even consider himself in the Michael category, because that would at least give him one more than Michael, and now you can start calling it even the Michael. 6-0 in the finals. That's all that matters,
right? But then again, Bill Russell's better than Michael Jordan. If that's
no. That's just for this argument. Stop trying to put the arguments on other things. Joe, come on. You know how the arguments work?
Yes.
I get
We're going selective reasoning, I guess.
I get to put the goalposts wherever I want, and you have to go find them. All right, that's going to do it for this in the Lindsey Hunter episode, Joel C. Cordes.
Like, share, subscribe on YouTube if you want the video version. If you want audio only, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes is where you get your podcast. It has been fun, and so much fun that we'll do it again next week. Thanks, Arky, Shea.
Thanks, Joel.